moving to my topic tonight of what I'm going to say, goal, purpose, and meaning, and a few other things. I'll give you an example. So when we came to the Shabbat dinner at the hotel, the young woman who was seating us came up behind me and said, Mr. and Mrs. Finley. And you don't expect people to know your name when you walk into a dining a Shabbat dinner. Obviously, we had given them our name, but never occurred to me they would tell that to the waitress who would identify us and take us to our table. I don't know how that happened, but it sounded like our daughter Shuli's voice. So I thought, wow, Shuli, did she show up? And I looked behind, of course, it's not Shuli. And I thought you were my daughter. And she said, oh, does your daughter live in Israel? And we said, oh, boy, does our daughter live in Israel? And so she hears my voice and she says, where are you from? Are you visiting? I said, no, we're from Los Angeles. But we actually moved here, made Aliyah in June. And she said, well, why? You know, and we said, October 7th. And she said, but you came because people are leaving. You came because of October 7th? And we told her our story that you all know by this point that Shuli was in Canada, getting ready to go back to the Nova Festival. And she called me and said, should I come down to LA for mommy's birthday, which is October 7th? If Mayrav's birthday had not been October 7th, Shuli would have been at the Nova Festival. So, Shuli came down, and, the Avigah was AWL for 12 hours. And, we went through the trauma that almost every Israeli went through, aside from those who were directly traumatized and even more directly traumatized. And we finally came here in December, and I had that epiphany, theophany, revelation or something. We have to be here. We have to be here. And maybe remember the email y'all got in January? We have to be there. And here we are. And she said, wow, what an amazing story. And I thought about that, of the thing that I wrote at the end of my Shabbat email, which is sometimes purpose just delivers itself up to you. And something so strong, so palpable, that you evade and avoid, really at the risk of the wholeness of your soul. I mean, I say to people, I actually could not be here. Rob said, can you imagine if we didn't move? I said, I know I can't imagine, because I had to be here. It's like the deepest, most singular passion I felt in my entire life for one specific thing that developed within a 2-minute experience. I was in the lemon orchard, went out to the road, looked at the soldiers and the other people, and I heard the cannon fire from Gaza, and just like the heavens opened up, and it's like Moses at the burning bush. It just was delivered over to me. It called me, Rabbi, and said, how soon can you get us here? We have to be here. So I don't think I've ever felt, coming here was way more than a goal. I mean, I could have said, yeah, we have a goal to retire in Israel, half in LA. That was our goal. When purpose arrives, either it develops slowly or it's, comes all in one moment. When purpose arrives, I think I've said something like this before, you don't have purpose. Purpose has you. Purpose grabs you by the lapels and shakes you and says, there's something that you must do. And to put it briefly, one definition of meaning in life is a coherent sense that your life is about something. Whether a lover of poetry, whether you're a teacher, medical supply business where you're helping save people's lives, a professor, all the kinds of things. Like, what's your life about? Sometimes our lives are about our jobs, and sometimes our jobs help us fund what our lives are about. But another very common definition of meaning is the intense meaning that comes from the suffering that is required in order to fulfill the purpose. So I'm looking at Susie and Jean, really fine, accomplished musicians. And Jean, you didn't come out of the womb with a guitar, right? I mean, that was something you picked up a little bit later in life. And from being a plugger over here, and I look at a virtuoso, and I thought to myself, you put in some hours on the mat. You put in a lot of hours to achieve that skill, to not just how to play, but to play with others. I mean, I saw behind the scenes, and I know what it takes as a someone who's watching and now then participating, what it means to create great music. So if one of your life's purpose, I'm looking at Susie and Jean, is to to enjoy the depth of music and then bring that to other people, um, you know, meaning comes, I think, when the band clicks. Suddenly there's that moment when everything is in the groove, or you are. So I think meaning happens when you put all the work to fulfill purpose, and then everything aligns. I know I feel that as a teacher, as a counselor. I really work hard to do well at what I do, and there's some moment when meaning comes out of all the work that I put in, and everything aligns. So I think goals are things that we say sometimes we mean it, but it becomes purpose when you're willing to sacrifice. That's how I'm defining it. It's not a dictionary definition. And meaning comes from carrying the burden in order to fulfill your purpose. I mean, when people talk about the purpose of parenting, many from my parenting the soul of the child classes, I know that many people don't parent purposefully. They don't parent mindfully. They manage the kids. They try to correct the kids when they're wrong, but the idea of what is the purpose and meaning of parenting, and now that you have, for example, rooted yourself into the purpose and meaning of parenting, what will you do and what will you not do? And my parenting the soul of the child class, I mean, it comes from our experience as really trying to be mindful, purposeful parents. How many parents, when they listen to the class, it's a revelation to them. When I say no 4 C's, no criticizing, complaining to your child about themselves, no harsh language, and do not tolerate escalating conflict, they're looking and say, that's basically what my parenting is. And I say, it should not be that. And well, what if you do when your kid doesn't obey you? I said, that's a question asked too late always, but let's try to rewind this. So, when I think about these little elements of wisdom, goals are things you want to do. Purpose for me is because you have to do it. Something in your soul says, I must be that. I must know how to do that. I must become that. And meaning takes shape in general in lives from again, a coherent sense that our lives mean something, but more specifically in those moments when sacrifice and suffering bear the fruit, and suddenly, again, like purpose, meaning just appears before you and envelops you. A couple of little anecdotes about that. I remember a long time ago, a temple member, I was counseling about something, and mentioned to me that they had been in Europe and went to a Jewish bookseller somewhere, and a wise aged man was running the Jewish bookstore. And person said to me, successful businessman in his 50s, said to me, I want to be like that. I want to have that wisdom. I want to have that knowledge, and kind of a goal. I want to be that. And I said, that man's been doing it for 50 years and been doing it every day for 50 years. So when you look at something and say, well, I'd like to be that, probably not. I mean, it's a nice goal. You're probably not going to put in the time, but what does it mean for you to be that? What is that saying about you? He says, well, I want to be, if I'm right about that man, the Orthodox Jewish bookseller, he had a kind of an inner peace. Everything he said was wise. He seemed to be rooted in his soul. He just had an aura about him. I said, well, is that a goal? Is that truly a goal for you? To the point that you'll do whatever it takes. And he said, like what? And first thing I said is, put it in your calendar. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, if it's not in your calendar, it's not purpose. See, if you don't put it in your calendar and it doesn't put you in a specific place at a specific time, doing a specific thing, it's a nice idea. And he said, well, if I want to be that person with deep self-knowledge, a deep sense of well-being, being a person of wisdom and, quoting scripture without being that Orthodox rabbi, he said,
No, my
what kind
speaker
of time we
isn't
talking
working.
about? I said, 2 hours a day for the rest of your life. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I said, okay, well, how much time would you give it? Honestly. I said, for example, if you said to me, Rabbi Finley, can you get me there? I'd say at least an hour a day for the rest of your life. He said, well, I don't know where I would put that. I mean, I have a business and I'm married and I have kids. I said, okay, you've answered the question. It's a goal, but not purpose. And you might wake up one day, when you're in my, I get to say when you're 70. I remember Leonard Cohen when I had my 60th birthday and I had these revelations, and Leonard says to me, yeah, I used to think that when I was 62. So whatever age we are, there's another age. We're gonna look back and say, yeah, I thought that. In any case, I said, you might regret it. You might regret that you didn't put in the hour a day in your 50s, so that by the time you are 70, you would have learned the specific suffering that you have to do to achieve that. Because to be a consistent person of depth, um, I'll go on to the next level, which is a person of truth. I wrote it in my email. I've been thinking about this a lot because when you ask ChatGPT, uh, she's undecided. She'll tell you a lot, but remember, all Wikipedia and ChatGPT, they're just collecting everything, all the information in the world, and a lot of people put wrong information out. I've looked. Abigail says, "Daddy, it knows everything." So I asked ChatGPT a couple of hard questions. I said, "Yeah, not everything. In fact, some things are exactly opposite." Uh, Abigail asked ChatGPT um, uh, the meaning of Plato's cave, and ChatGPT gave her an Aristotelian perspective. And I whispered so she couldn't hear it. I said, that's Aristotle, not Plato. And so Abigail says, uh, could you please explain that again with less Aristotle and more Plato? And it went, oops. It actually wrote oops and then rewrote the answer. So she says, yeah, Daddy, it's a machine. It's not, I mean, we feel like it's a person because, hers is a he, mine's a she. So it's so attentive. Um, but if you say to ChatGPT, what is wisdom? Well, it'll spew out information. It's not going to transform you. It's not going to give you life's purpose or meaning. I mean, that's from somewhere else. So when the person said, I won't do that, I said, so it's really important for you to know that. You have the goal of that, but it hasn't reached out of your soul, grabbed you by the lapels and said, you must do this. And I said to him, I'm not saying you can't do that, but if you don't suffer, if you don't sacrifice, from my perspective, it's not life's purpose. And it probably will not eventually create a lot of meaning because meaning comes from suffering. Okay, so back to being a true person. I've really thought a lot about this because, a couple of weeks ago, I told you I saw an ad that I could go to an ulpan so I could speak Hebrew well enough that I would know my true self. I thought, wow, I'll take that with a 20% discount if I sign up now. And then a few days later, I read a creative writing class in English so I could know how to be my authentic self. And I thought to myself, I think it's the same person who's bilingual. And I thought, what if it's true? What if there's a hidden mystic in Tel Aviv turning people into people of truth and authenticity and hiding behind creative language, creative writing and the language school? Putting that aside, I thought, what does it mean to be a person of truth? And I've taught about this in my wisdom works. I call it second level wisdom works when I talk about levels of what I call the higher self. To do any transformative work, you have to be able to move up to what I call the observer mind. You have to be able to observe how your unconscious ego self is influencing your life. You have to look at your state of consciousness and be able to see the flow and what kinds of things are in and what kind of moods and dispositions and the positive ego states and negative ego states. You first have to observe, then look at it objectively, um, especially the negative ego states, and be able to identify the negative ego state and what triggered it. Are your feelings rooted in reality, or is there a little bit of reality but a lot of feelings? That takes a profoundly developed objective minds for people to say, I feel it strongly, but I don't think my feelings are proportionate to what happened. That's on the path to saintliness. My feelings go far beyond whatever was the cause of my feelings. Meaning those came from within me. It's very typical for us to assign the source of feelings outside of us, as opposed to the trigger, the proximate cause that brought the feelings up. But the feelings are ours. That's one of the functions of what I call the objective mind, objectively assessing what is the nature and cause of our inner life. I want to share something else with you. A person was upset with somebody and didn't want to invite them to a party because they said the person is disrespectful and makes them feel bad. And the person said, but I know that's about me. I know that's I'm being narcissistic. I should just get over it. I said, wait, are you saying that if you had kind of Iron Man feelings, that you are actually immune from other people's disrespect, that you should invite the person? Meaning, if the disrespect didn't bother you. So, well, if the disrespect wouldn't bother me, yeah, fine. I said, I want you to take a deep breath. It's a moral affront to publicly disrespect people. Even if it didn't hurt your feelings, they shouldn't be at your party because they don't respect you. It's not about your feelings. I said, are you sure they disrespected you? Said, yes. People around said, oh my God, that person is so off. I said, so the feelings certainly tell you how you feel about something, but they don't determine if there's been a moral offense. If there has been a moral offense, it's a moral offense if it got to your feelings or not. You could say to somebody, you just said something so incredibly rude and disrespectful. I'm glad to say my feelings weren't hurt because I don't have expectations that you are a civil or respectful person. However, I can't be around you. The person, well, did I hurt you? You didn't hurt me at all. I'm immune. However, you still can't be around me because you committed a moral offense. So when I do my section on objective mind, I do a long section on that. The next, what I call the rational mind, which is creating theories about everything that I just said, theories about myself, the nature of my feelings, my ego self. So I have organized knowledge, so I don't have to invent my knowledge every time I sit down and do my contemplative practice. After a while, I have a theory about myself, a theory about other people, about my wife, my children. And so the world is not always brand new. Now, my theories have to be constantly evaluated, constantly amended. But in general, it's just another example that oftentimes with married couples, a person says, I don't understand why my husband does that. And I said, that sounds like a complaint. I said, what does your husband do? Okay, yeah, that's pretty off. I said, and how long has your husband been like this? Virtually our whole marriage. I said, you sound surprised. The person says, well, I just don't understand why. I said, because it's your husband. That's who he is. Let's have a theory about your husband. He's touchy. He's not always in control of himself. He doesn't regulate well. So I don't know the mystical cause, whether it's, astrology or bad parenting or person. I don't know, but he does it and he does it continuously. So my question to you is, why are you surprised, truly? And the person said, well, okay, you're right. I should not be surprised. So what do? I said, you have to have a theory about your husband, that every time you see your husband, you say to yourself, this is the man that I love, that I married, that I had children with, who is touchy, dysregulates easily, not fully in control of himself. Now, honey, talk. So whatever he says, she goes, yeah, that's you. Okay. No surprise, no shock. That's just you. And I love you and I'm staying with you. But don't say, oh my God, I can't believe that the man is doing exactly what he's been doing for 15 years. That probably is not going to be emotionally healthy for you or your marriage. Same with ourselves. I have a theory about myself. I more or less know how I'm going to feel, how I'm going to think, what ego states will be evoked at different places and different times. So I'm not a surprise to myself. And that way I can actually be on a path of transformation. So when I talk about the levels of the higher self, I think of observer mind, objective mind, rational mind, and then truth mind. I think these are the basic. I mean, above that is um, the moral mind, which actually comes in with the rational mind, because I think morality is essentially a rational discipline. That for another time. And then love and beauty and all the way up. But essentially, when we can observe our inner lives, be objective about it, whether what's going on in our inner lives are connected or not to the outside world in a proportionate way. If we are able to think rationally about things, about ourselves, other people, including about moral issues, because although morality feels like emotions, it is. We feel sorry for people, we feel bad, we feel mad. We have to theorize about it to actually make a moral judgment. Moral issues are felt, but the moral evaluation is rational. Now, when I get to the truth mind, and again, I've tried to describe this many times. There's one particular counseling case I think I've mentioned to you. A woman was really suffering, a woman with a husband, a couple of kids, and she was constantly unsettled. She says, I'm not settled. I don't feel good in my skin. It got down to her mother, and she was the um, another daughter who did not fit the mother's country club, social club. I've told you the story about the funeral preparation meeting of what I'll call the outcast daughter. Well, this wasn't the outcast daughter because the mother was still alive. And she says, "Why is my mother? Why is my mother?" I shared with you, and we had already met several times. I said, I want to say something to you, but it's going to be harsh. So I can say it the nice way and take an hour. I can say it the quick way and say it in 5 minutes, and then we'll spend an hour talking about how I just hurt your feelings. She said, "Okay, Rabbi Finley, that's why I came to you. You're like the truth sayer. Go ahead." I said, "Your mother doesn't like you, and I'm not even sure if she loves you." She was like, uh, I said, "Does that seem about right?" She goes, "Yeah, but I've never thought it before," and explains everything. And I'm so hurt. She said, "No, you didn't hurt me. The truth hurts." I said, "The truth will hurt until it doesn't hurt, and then life won't hurt so much." To realize that I'm not what my mother thought when she had a daughter. She thought I would fit in at the country club, not to be kind of whacked out bohemian. And my mother is always telling me what to do to be more like her. And I said, well, the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean to live with the truth that your mother doesn't like you and might not even love you? I said, and proceed here from your life. And she knew this all along. I just was able to put it into words, meaning it was a moment of truth. And she said, okay. I said, so that hour a week where you go to the country club and she criticizes you for an hour, you probably should stop that. I said, I understand the meaning that you find in it because you have a purpose to be close to your mother. I get it. And you're doing an hour a week and you're suffering her criticism, which I don't think is appropriate suffering. So, but I wonder is, what meaning does your mother derive from those moments? Meaning when she arrives at that lunch with you, what is her purpose in life? Her purpose in life is to change you. And if I may, disfigure you. Your mother doesn't respect who you are, your personality, your way of being. As Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, he says the drachim v'hergelim of the inner life, the pathways and habits of the inner life. She doesn't think about you. She looks at you and she says, a project to change. And I said, I don't think that amounts to a valid purpose with, unless you sign up, for someone to actually change you. And So this is going to violate your spirit and is bringing out the worst in her. I said, I think you should stop with those monthly meetings or set the rules down, which is we're not going to talk about me. And she said, Rabbi, if we didn't talk about me, I don't know what we talk about. I said, well, there's that. And we met a couple more times, and she said, thank you. I don't think I need any more therapy. I'll check in with you now and then, but you released me. You freed me. So when I think of the truth mind, is a kind of a consciousness where you get to the truth of the matter, you can articulate it about yourself, about another person, about the world, and there's a kind of a devastating heaviness if you've been avoiding it and evading it your whole life. So part of what I mean by the true self as a project, and again, I don't think you find the true self. You might find a truth, but you become a person of truth, as I wrote in my email, without pretensions, without falsehoods. As the Kabbalah would say, you're not in Olam Shikara, the world of lies. You more or less know what you're working with, and you know what the things that challenge you. And I think a person of truth in a value-driven way is at work. And there are things that you might never become. It's just not in your envelope, and you've reconciled yourself to that. We say in Hebrew, lahashlim, to be okay with it, from the word shalom, to make peace with things that, as people say in the Fritz Perls prayer, to accept the things we cannot change about ourselves, as long as it's not a moral offense. So when I say the truth mind, there's a deep sense of self-knowledge, knowing what we ought to work on, making peace with what we can't work on, but especially, if I think about this woman, getting to the hidden truths that are deep inside and plaguing us. I was rereading Psalm 104 because one reason we got off track last week, Abigail and I, is that as we were preparing, and she wanted to know more about the prayer for light in the Shabbat morning service. We went to Psalm 104. It's an extraordinary psalm, by the way. A lot of the meditation on light, and then a meditation on the various ways that God's power comes into the world. And all of a sudden it says that God, Yatsar, shaped Leviathan to play with. And we went, what? And this idea that God plays with his fish every day. Okay, so we knew well enough not to make a theology out of it, but we just thought of all the places where we have these anthropomorphizing of God, and we just, we cackled and didn't do our homework for last Saturday. We had a lot of fun though. I lost my train of thought. Hold on a second, I'll catch it. All right, so back to a person of truth. I know. There is a line in that psalm that says something about, the one sentence says, I don't have it in front of me, something, God covers something about something Adam, and then the next sentence begins Adam something else, two different sentences. But the two words together was Adam Tahom. Now, they're two different sentences, but they're next to each other. Of course, the Bible does not have punctuation. I just read this yesterday. I want to go back and reread the psalm. The person is an abyss. Now, I don't mean that, think about it in a negative way. I just think there's a great dark chasm deep inside of us that we don't know about, that we haven't been in there, but it is filled with the things that are percolating up into consciousness and producing feelings that we don't know, feelings that we can't find their source. By the way, I think that's one of the roots of poetry, and one of the reasons we read poetry, because sometimes poetry comes out of that darkness and it expresses, in a beautiful way, the shapes in the darkness. And I think reading poetry helps us map out the abyss. So I thought about what was said earlier, that Shanti said about the executive, that when he's not feeling his mojo, let's say, he reads poetry, because he has to explore the Tahom, the abyss within us. And there are certain poems, when you read them, you feel aligned. You're reminded of your purpose. You're reminded of life truth, which is one reason I so strongly recommend a spiritual practice that contains depth. In my mind, has to contain poetry. And if you like to read our national poetry, study the Bible, especially Psalms and Proverbs. That's I study Psalms and Proverbs every day to study the repository of poetry that we all have a common language. That's one reason I study it, and that is magnificent, transformative, and many times comes out of that abyss. And I'll read a verse in a psalm, and I just will be like it grabbed me. I'll be confounded. I'll be dumbfounded that somebody thought that and wrote it in such a beautiful way. So when I think of a person of truth, a person who is willing to know there are undiscovered truths within. And again, you can ignore it your whole life, or you can decide I want to know the truth. Now, one of the problems, as much as I respect any kind of therapy and counseling, one problem with a counselor or therapist who stays in method, for example, psychodynamic counseling, where it goes back to your parents, they have a solution that might not be true to home, which is why I say to people, if you're going to take counsel with somebody, don't do it with a person who's attached to a method. For me, all of the different psychological methods is like they're in potential, they're in my quiver, as it were. But once I listen to a person, I have a sense which method applies here. People call that existential counseling, because it's the existential moment that drives the therapeutic method, as opposed to a therapeutic method that just places itself between the counselor and the client before a word is spoken. So I say to people, if that is what you need to know, suffering from your parents down inside the home, that's what you need to know. But sometimes that's not what's in your home. There's something else down in the abyss. All right, so that when I say a person of truth, sometimes you can tell people who know about themselves. One thing I sometimes say to a person who's starting counseling, I say, what do you want? What's your purpose? And I say, where's your suffering? And they say, I don't know. I said, well, it's time to think. What exactly is the nature of your suffering? Are you suffering towards something? Are you suffering because of something? Is the suffering coming from the abyss? Some great disappointment in life? Have you lost purpose and meaning, and you're suffering because you can't get it back? I think one essential question that a person of truth asks is, what is the nature of my suffering? And be able to talk about that. Okay, now I went from that to an authentic person. Rabbi and I spend a lot of time talking about this. And one thing we concluded, and again, I'm not giving dictionary definitions. I wanted to think about things so that I can use that you can use. It seems to me that authenticity is more of an interpersonal thing, meaning that I might say that's a really authentic person. It's something that emerges out of, let's say, becoming a person of truth, or maybe they both come from a common source. I don't know if authenticity derives from being a person of truth, or whether they are two things from one source. I'm not sure if I have to figure that out. But we were thinking about ourselves. Who are some of the authentic people that we know? We would say, oh, authentic. And what does that mean? Well, one thing it means is we didn't feel there was a mask. We didn't feel they were hiding something. That we all have a persona, clearly, but we didn't feel there's something fundamentally different from the mask that is being projected. Sometimes again, I don't think I'd ever say this to a person, but I don't know who I'm talking to, because the person I'm talking to is not real. It's a fabrication. And there are some people you talk to and say, wow, that's what it is. I mean, this person, as much as a person can, and again, it depends on time and circumstances, is being real. They're not holding back. I mean, we can't be fully authentic and real all the time, maybe not even most of the time, but we can be more authentic and real and not hide behind a carefully manufactured mask. So I think authenticity comes from, again, either too intuitive or developed capacity to be a person of truth. And again, if authenticity is not intuitive and natural, a decision to, as much as possible, remove as many layers of the mask as you can. Now, so I'll wrap up here. So all this is in the service of what? I'm getting back to my Wisdom Works book. I sent it to a publisher 2023, soon after my surgery was in February. May or so, I set off to the publisher. I got really good responses. Getting ready to rewrite the book. October 7th happened. So I'm back. And one thing I'll say is I'm rethinking everything. I mean, I have a lot of good wisdom in there, not in the right order. And I thought about, like, what do you master first? And what theories are needed for what practice? So I'm reorganizing everything, and I really, really like it. I think it's gonna be a far better book, or maybe two books. The courses are going to be better. We're getting, we're getting over our exhaustion from the past however many years, and I'm really excited. And one thing I'm doing, I'm doing everything from the beginning, from beginner mind. I don't know what wisdom is. I don't know what truth is. I don't know authenticity. I got to rethink everything. No stale answers. And this being the case, I think something I didn't do, like a preface to wisdom. A preface to wisdom, in my mind, it some degree of this idea of wisdom being at least partially knowing what your goals are and distinguishing between goals and purpose, having a sense of what your purpose is. And if you don't feel purpose, say, I don't feel purpose in my life. What gives you meaning? If you don't have meaning, go ahead and say, I don't feel meaning in my life. Those are things to know. But if you don't feel purpose and you don't feel meaning, you have to ask, what's my suffering? Because sometimes we don't feel purpose and meaning because we're not willing to suffer. And sometimes we don't have meaning and purpose because we suffered too much, that we used to, but we didn't get what we wanted to get, and we just feel deflated. We just feel emptied out. So I think these are prior questions. If I could do everything over again, I would say you need to come to a seminar to talk about goals, purpose, and meaning, and make that part of your daily practice. And then another part of the preface to wisdom would be continuous work in self-knowledge, meaning the true self. Insight to myself. Who am I? How do I operate? These other people that I complain about, well, who are they? Have a theory about them. And don't every day be surprised that the person you live with is the same person you lived with 10 years ago, more or less. Don't be shocked by life and behavior of other people, because you refuse to know the truth in front of you and create a theory about it. So some part of wisdom is what I'll call knowledge, but especially knowledge as insight. That knowledge as insight turns into a theory. So it's not just raw facts of knowledge, but you've actually created something to help you go through life. So you have an always adjustable lens by which you see things. So when I see, a person, I have a theory about that person, and I'm willing to adjust the theory, but we can get started here. From that, again, if there's a question in front of you, that ultimately you have to make judgments, either moral judgments or other judgments. And again, upon reflection, when I think about myself and so many people I know, most people who suffer have suffered because they made terrible judgments. They judged the world, they judged somebody, they judged another person that they could trust them. They judged something that they wanted to do, and it turned out to not be the right thing to do. And people have said, why did I suffer from such poor judgment? And sometimes I say, did you know yourself? Did you know what was up? Did you have some goal that was not real or reasonable for you? So again, I think people suffer because of lack of wisdom. If wisdom is knowledge, theories, and then judgment about what you have to do or not do, in a very true sense, and then have the as usual, the will and the skill to do it. And all this has to be redone every single day. So I'm thinking about wisdom. I think what I've gotten to is some kind of foundation that when I think about, well, what if I were wise? I would be a person of truth if I were wise. And I think I'd be as authentic as possible. And I think that I know the distinction between lofty goals and things for which I have purpose. And if I really have purpose, I'm willing to suffer to fulfill that purpose. And that meaning comes from my suffering. All that being said, what do I want to do? And because then I saw wisdom works flowing out of that, because when people say that what they want to do is get along with their spouses, get along with their kids as purpose, as I'll do anything to do that. Person says, I want to get along with my kid. I said, what will you do to get along with your kid? I'm waiting for anything within moral reason. I said, including not giving your child unsolicited advice. Will you not give unsolicited advice? Sometimes that's one of the major things with parents and teenage children. And right, there's only one right answer. What they say is, well, how will I do this and how will I do that? I said, I think to myself, okay, time to get to work. Because the only right answer with a teenager, young adult is do not give unsolicited advice. If they're not seeking your wisdom, let's start there. Not how do I persuade my child to do what I want them to do, but rather, how do I present myself as a font of wisdom so my child will seek my wisdom from me? Now, when I've said that to some parents, they say, that sounds so right. I have no idea how to do that. I really want to become that. And I think I've been parenting exactly opposite from a parent of wisdom, that the child says, I know who has wisdom, my mom or my dad. I want to ask them. You don't have to tell them, they're going to come to you. So you want to parent that way, instead of what you've been doing is shaming your child, making your child feel bad about themselves and not wanting to be around you, which is so often the case with adolescents and young adults. So you want to be close to your kid? First thing is, will you drop unsolicited advice? They say, explain. 5 minutes later, they say, okay, I'll stop. Thank you. I said, you have to work on it every day. They said, no, I'm on it. You're right. I have destroyed my connection with my kid. I'm stopping right now. I think I told you the anecdotes where I'm teaching the parenting the soul of the child class, person in front of me. I said, and I see the person, like the lights go on. You can almost see their the room they're in, take the aura of a holy moment. The person says, what do I do? I said, well, where's your kid? Down the hall. I said, as soon as this session ends, you walk down the hall and apologize to your kid, truly, sincerely, and profusely, and tell them you're on the path to become a person of truth. Person says, okay, I'm on it. So next session, person's there. And I said, would you be willing to share? Oh my God. It was such a profound moment for the whole class. Person, I did it. And we had the deepest talk of our life. It's our relationship just transformed like within an hour. I'm a new person. She's a new person. It was really great. But they just had to understand that a child's not a project. A child has a soul. A child is trying to find their way through the world. And you don't help a child by disfiguring their soul because of what you want them to be. I'm not saying you don't have good ideas, but it should be delivered as wisdom, not as control. So there's an example that when I get to wisdom work, virtue, no criticizing, including unsolicited advice, and complaining, condemn with harsh language, and escalating conflict, and the bad Jedi. Someone's upset at a certain point, knock off the justifying, explaining, etc. And then all the rules of what I call the first basic course, the first 2 stripes on the white belt of no 4 C's, no bad Jedi, and so forth. I see what happened this week for me is, once I conceived of the preface to wisdom, now all the things that I've been teaching all of a sudden all made sense. I see where it's coming from. Why do I want to master virtue? Because I want good relationships, and it's a purpose, and I'll do whatever it takes. And then in those moments when I am truly virtuous in the face of incredible triggers from the outside or old bad habits from the inside, and I withstand the pressure of not responding to triggers. I want to stay in my game. I want to be a person of virtue. I feel things building up inside of me. And I say to myself, don't talk, listen, don't talk. I have something to say and just don't say anything. Let him get it out. And don't give advice until I'm asked for it. And then I pass through that moment, think to myself, wow, I did it. Like I was actually a pretty good parent just now. It's a very deeply meaningful thing. So I'm reconceiving the entire Wisdom Works project. And this week I meditated on elements of wisdom, knowledge, theories, good judgment. And by the resistance to all this, another talk, connected to truth and authenticity. That's the words I've been working this week, and I feel I made some progress. I'm excited to continue the project. And here's this synchronicity. I applied for a trademark with Wisdom Works so that I actually own the term. So someone can't come and say, you can't call this Wisdom Works, I already own it. And it turns out somebody did own it. So I filed the trademark, and the person just lost interest and didn't use it. And they had the chance to respond, and they wrote them and said, do you want this back? And they never heard from them. So I got the trademark. So the same week that I've been doing this, I get a notice from the patent office, I think, whatever it's called. They said, you own the trademark. And they didn't say, now get to work and earn it. But I felt that. So that felt nice